forget to listen, like, and subscribe to the Legal Face Off podcast on social media and WGNradio.com. Antonio Romanucci is a founding partner with Romanucci and Blandin Law. He's represented the family of George Floyd, victims of the Las Vegas shooting, the Highland Park shooting. And actually, that's one of the reasons that we wanted to chat with him today. Mr. Romanucci, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
So, Tony, we're quickly approaching the second year anniversary of the 4th of July mass shooting in Highland Park that killed 7 people and injured 48 others. And your firm specializes in handling mass shooting cases, and in September of 2022 filed litigation against assault weapons manufacturer Smith & Wesson, as well as other defendants in multiple lawsuits on behalf of 40 individuals who were impacted by the shooting. Can you tell us more about who your clients are and how they are doing, particularly in the wake of the anniversary of the shooting, and who the defendants are and where these litigations currently stand?
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina. And I'll try and give a nice capsulized summary of what the litigation is and where we stand right now and who our clients are. As most people know, there was a parade in Highland Park on July 4th, 2022. And there was an assailant who was in possession of an AR-15 styled gun, which had a high capacity magazine, which he was able to switch out 2 times. Each magazine carried 30 pieces of ammunition, and he was able to get off over 80 shots in really under about 90 seconds. And it caused just extreme and horrific carnage in Highland Park. People died, people were injured, people have been traumatized. The number of injuries, when you look at the number of deaths and injuries and the emotional trauma, we were looking at probably 50, 60 people that really, are now suffering permanent harms as a result of what happened. So we did. We in fact filed a lawsuit against not only the assailant and his father, but also against the gun manufacturer, which in this case was Smith & Wesson. And that's because we felt that it was time that somebody else take action against the gun manufacturers, because we know that Congress, and at that time our state, had not yet been involved in an assault weapon ban. An AR-15, it's marketed as a hunting rifle, but it's not. It was originally developed back in the 1950s to be an assault weapon, and then it developed into a consumer product. And what they've done is, rather than style it as a military weapon, they say it's a hunting rifle. But indeed, it's really what they do is they advertise it as a military weapon. They indoctrinate teenagers into this beautiful lifestyle of power and courage and attractive people and having control of your life with these weapons. And then they carry out their fantasies with them. And so we thought that they had violated, Illinois consumer fraud law, and we sued them exactly for that.
And just speaking of that, we covered extensively, as did most legal analysts, the recent conviction in Michigan of the parents of a shooter there. How does your approach to this litigation and going after the gun manufacturers correlate to this trend? Seemingly, at least that was the first of what we expect to be many prosecutions of parents of these shooters. How do those two things relate?
Well, Rich, that's a very good question, because I know the attorney very well. He's a very good friend of mine who was representing the families in the Oxford school shooting in Michigan. And we watched very closely what liability or what culpability the parents would have. And as you can see, what we're trying to develop is a strategy here to stop people being killed, whether it is suing parents, which sounds abhorrent, doesn't it? But if a parent has knowledge or knew or should have known or has the ability to stop a troubled teen or a troubled youth from using a weapon to kill, then they have that responsibility. And just like what happened here, the father of the assailant was convicted for assisting in getting his son those weapons by signing the FOID card, by validating him. So this is an all-encompassing strategy that we are looking for from some of the greatest minds in the legal field to stop these mass shootings.
So, Tony, another significant aspect of your firm's legal practice is in the area of wrongful convictions. Several months ago, the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin ran a story about how Illinois leads the country in overturned wrongful convictions. Can you tell us more about what's going on here and your firm's contributions in this area?
Sure. It's really an inglorious distinction that now we lead the country in overturned convictions and exonerated people. And the reason that's happened is because the way that I've been phrasing it is Chicago has had a runway of horrific police officers who have committed terrible deeds against a number of people for decades and decades. So now all of those convictions, people that have been serving 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 35 years, up to 40 years, they're all rising to the surface. They're all bubbling up. They're all coming up. And now they're saying, well, wait, I spent more than half my life, almost my entire life in jail. I want to be compensated for that time, and rightfully so. So when you look at, for example, the infamous officers who are right now being implicated in the most serious exonerations, of course, there's John Burge, and then there's Ronaldo Guevara. Those are two of the most infamous officers who account for literally thousands of years of people wrongfully incarcerated. And then we've got all these other peripheral detectives out there who have committed the same kind of misconduct, but not to the higher level of the ones that Burge and Guevara did. And so our firm has taken a leading position in suing the city of Chicago and some of these bad cops to get recompense for these people who have suffered so greatly.
Tony, you're also taking on police misconduct in a different way in a number of cases, but most recently last week, you filed a lawsuit against Elk Grove Village, not too far from Chicago here, and 5 officers who you alleged were involved in the death of Jack Murray. Your allegation is that the officers used excessive force, used lethal force when non-lethal force was available. Tell us quickly a little more about that and also your efforts with Ben Crump, who's your partner in a lot of these civil rights cases, who's been on our show before, about the work you're doing there.
Yeah, well, what happened in Elk Grove Village, I think, is an absolute travesty. It really is one of the more tragic cases that we'll encounter, because there was a young man who was also troubled, who actually called the police. He called the police on himself saying, I need help. He was mentally not well. He was physically injured, and he needed help. His parents were in the house. His parents were on the phone with the police. They were telling the police that Jack needs help. He needs medical help. He needs mental health help. And the police arrived and they called Jack out to the street. And what happens with emotionally disturbed people, what's predictable about them is that they act unpredictably. And so Jack, unfortunately, had a knife in his hand. At least that's what it appears to be. And with him walking towards the police with the knife, what happened first was whether they tased him, they shot the beanbag gun, they shot weapons at him, they shot guns at him, and he died. This is somebody who should not have died. They should have taken their time with him, de-escalated the situation, and preserved his life as opposed to taking his life. So what Ben and I have done, what we are trying to do, is talking to anybody that we can, including you all, because this is very important for not only for you, but for the listeners, to understand that the only way right now that we can make a difference when it comes to policing standards in this country is by getting change in either local law or state laws, because Congress is not taking the steps to change them on their own because they can't. They don't have the votes to do it. So we have to talk to people and we have to go state to state to try and get those changes.
Attorney Antonio Romanucci, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.